Welcome to Canada's podcast.
Hello and welcome to Calgary's podcast with Mario Tonaguzzi on Canada's Podcast Network. Joining me today is Alex MacGregor, who is CEO of Cube Technologies in Calgary. Thanks for joining us today, Alex.
Thanks for having me, Mario.
Well, let me just start by asking you, what is Cube Technologies? What do you guys do?
Yeah, for sure. So we're a technology company, and we've built a low-cost surveillance platform that uses the Internet of Things and artificial intelligence for emissions monitoring. And we're really focused on methane, but we also measure other gases. And the Internet of Things is kind of a strange word, so I'll give a better description of it. So you can think of our product as a industrial smoke alarm with a brain and an LTE modem. So we're typically installing these devices at oil and gas facilities, and we're helping oil and gas companies measure, manage, and reduce methane emissions.
How did you, when did the company start, first of all?
So we got started in 2018.
Okay.
And so the company was founded by a new immigrant from India who had an electrical engineering degree, but moved to Canada to do further schooling. That's sort of your typical tech story, genius in a garage. In this case, it was Tej in Chestermere, and he had an abandoned well by his grandparents' house, and he decided to make an early prototype to monitor this abandoned well. And so from there, through an industry night at SAIT, he became connected to Carol Elliott, who was a long-term Shell operations employee. She saw a use for the technology within industry. And then kind of through a series of connections, Tej began working to develop the technology at the company I was working at the time, which was called Ambyint, which is another Calgary-based startup that makes a similar type of solution. I kind of saw what they were doing and became interested, so decided to get involved with it in my spare time, essentially.
So what does the name Cube signify?
So the name Cube, like our piece of hardware is just shaped like a cube, so we decided to call the company Cube. So
Okay.
Not a crazy backstory or anything. We also just kind of liked the way it sounded.
All right, super. So obviously you guys are entering the market at a time where this is extremely important, right? And you can't go a day in the news without hearing something about emissions, right?
Yeah, for sure. And methane's a particularly important greenhouse gas because it has 85 times the warming potential of CO2 over a 20-year period, but it also has a shorter half-life than CO2. So if it never enters the atmosphere, then you can reduce global warming. And a lot of the sources of methane emissions are known, and they can be addressed. And within Canada, the oil and gas industry is a fairly large emitter of methane. So they emit about 40 to 45% of methane emissions in Canada. And in order to reduce emissions, the federal government implemented new regulations at the start of 2020, which are targeting a 45% reduction in methane emissions.
Mm.
And the way they want to achieve that reduction is through 1 to 3 visits per year to operating facilities above a certain size. And they would inspect these facilities using an optical gas imaging camera, which kind of looks like a camcorder from the 90s, and you inspect the facility using this camera, if you find a leak, you have to fix it. But there's a couple problems with the camera. It's pretty expensive. Costs about $150,000 for a camera, plus the operator's time. And some of the other deficiencies is you only get a snapshot in time. So the analogy we like to use, and it kind of takes it back to that smoke alarm analogy, is that we like to think of the optical gas imaging camera as the fire department, going to every house in Western Canada looking for fires 1 to 3 times per year. If they find a fire, they can put it out. If they don't find a fire, one might start the next day and they won't know until the next visit. Whereas if you install our continuous monitoring system, you'll get a notification when you have a fire. Then you can send the fire department to put the fire out. And we just see that as a better operating model. And because we're low cost, we can help these oil companies save money in addition to reducing more emissions.
Super. Are you across North America?
We're primarily focused in Canada right now. We have had a little bit of interest from the States. And so we are going to be looking to expand into the US probably towards the end of this year. But we're really focused in Alberta right now, and we have a really good market here. And the regulator here, the Alberta Energy Regulator, has introduced a kind of progressive framework for getting alternative technologies like tubes approved for use for emissions reduction.
Okay. Roughly, how many sites are you at?
Yeah, good question. So we're at about 50 sites right now, but we're just starting to scale up. So we had some initial customers, and kind of based off of that success, we've been able to sign up a much larger number of customers. So we're working with about 10 companies now, and we're just scaling up kind of manufacturing, and we're going to be deploying about 1,500 of these devices over the next year and a half, primarily across Alberta.
Wow. I'm just curious. What's the size of, say, the device? Like, how big is it?
Yeah, so it's pretty small. Like, it would be probably, it's kind of cube shaped, as I mentioned,
Yeah.
and it'd be about 8 to 10 inches in each dimension. And so the device itself is battery and has a solar recharge capability. So that makes it kind of really easy to install at a facility and non-intrusive. So it takes about 20 to 30 minutes to set up our system.
Wow.
It begins collecting data and then transmits that data using the cellular network to our software.
So on a particular site, is only one device necessary?
Yeah, good question. So it depends on the site. So these sites kind of range in complexity. So it can be anything from a pump jack with a tank all the way up to a large gas plant. So for the simpler facilities, we're typically installing one device, and then for a complex facility, we're usually looking at 4 to 6 devices. And if we were to think of the device in terms of the area it can monitor, a single device can monitor about 100 meters squared. So pretty sizable area.
Let's talk a little bit about yourself. Like, what's your background that would have gotten you into doing something like this?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm an engineer by background. I started my career in the oil and gas industry, working for a small producer. I was working as a production operations engineer in Saskatchewan at a university. One of my friends, Eric, who is now my business partner, moved to a technology company called Enersite a few years out of university. Um, and he convinced me to join that company. The hook was that, well, I don't, I like small town Saskatchewan, but this Enersite was growing and they were opening up an Australian office, and he was able to recruit me on the basis of that. So
There you go.
it was really good experience. I got to kind of travel all over the world with Enersite, and they had a management team that put a lot of trust and responsibility, and some people that were fairly young and new out of school. So I really enjoyed that experience. I went to another startup kind of after that called Ambyint, another technology company in the oil and gas space. And so I thought I had some kind of good experience in terms of working a variety of roles at software companies in the tech space, and also understood some of the customer mindset from having worked at an oil and gas company. So
Yeah. So so you've been involved in a number of startups. What have you learned from being involved in startups that you can share with people?
so good question. I guess, I think whenever you have a job, like I think, me personally, I've always, there's always little things that kind of that bother you about the job or the way it's run. But when you have your own company, you're kind of responsible for all those complaints. So if you have a complaint, you just kind of have to fix it yourself. And that's been, one of the really rewarding parts of starting a company.
Oh, okay. What about the challenges of starting a company?
Yeah, for sure. So, we've been lucky in a lot of senses. We've received really good support from the federal and provincial government in terms of some of the grant funding success we have. In terms of the challenges, like, a pretty obvious one is that we're manufacturing uh, electronics. And there's a fairly large global chip shortage right now. So
Really?
that's affecting everyone from Apple to Ford, much larger companies. So just trying to secure components so we can, manufacture these and meet our customer commitments has been a bit of a challenge. And kind of we've also grown a lot recently, and so last year we were at 4 full-time employees, and we've grown to about 15 now. And just kind of culturally, when you're starting a new company, it's nice to spend time with your employees, but with some of the restrictions around COVID, obviously it's tougher to kind of develop that corporate culture over Zoom meetings like this.
Yeah, and you obviously sound like what you had mentioned earlier, that the company is going to continue to grow. In terms of the scalability of it, that presents obviously challenges as well, right? It's no longer a small company, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we've been hiring like a variety of different roles, and it keeps it pretty interesting. We're hiring software developers, hardware developers, data scientists, and then like a lot of our customer facing people. We want them to understand our customers well. So we've hired a couple engineers and operations people from oil and gas company who are kind of looking to reskill and get into tech. But overall, like we've developed this technology over 3 years now. It's very reliable, and we've kind of built it so that it is ready to scale.
I'm kind of curious. we're in Calgary, and we're overwhelmed sometimes by the oil patch because everything's about the oil patch in Calgary, right?
Yeah.
So as the oil patch goes, so does Calgary's type thing. How has everything, been for you guys dealing with the downturn? We started in late 2014. Oil prices started to go down, and that took down a lot of jobs. It took down the economy for a number of years. 7 years later, and we're actually, it's kind of amazing when you think about it. We're actually approaching 7 years here. 7 years later, we're still not out over that hump of coming back. What has been all that impact for you guys over the last couple of years?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think we're lucky in a certain sense, just because the new regulations did create a need for the product. So
Yeah.
like our opinion on it is, that these companies are going to spend money to reduce methane to meet their uh, regulatory compliance obligations. So as long as we're low cost, we feel like there's a good opportunity to get into oil companies kind of based off of that. But there's also a bit of a pull for a product. So um, at the same time as the new regulations, there's kind of more demands from investors, capital markets, and kind of end users of oil and gas to have responsibly sourced products. So, we're helping these companies meet their regulatory obligations at a lower cost, but also providing them with better data to support initiatives like ESG reporting. So,
Okay.
we've actually seen a pretty warm kind of response from customers.
I'm also curious about when you go back in time. Um, when did we start to see the introduction of technology in this field for monitoring emissions? When did that sort of start to come in?
Yeah, so like the term people use within the industry is leak detection and repair,
Yeah.
or LDAR, and people have been using optical gas imaging cameras for a long time, probably since maybe the 80s or 90s, to
Okay.
inspect facilities. It's what's really changed is the number of facilities that require LDAR inspections. So that's kind of increased significantly, and it's more of an impact on the upstream industry. And then I would say within the last, I don't know, 5 years, there's been a host of alternative technologies being introduced to the market. And we're a continuous monitoring technology that gets installed at a facility, but there's a host of other technologies that are being used to solve the problem. So people are installing sensors on satellites, airplanes, and I think there's room for a bunch of different technologies in this market, and they all have their own unique strengths and weaknesses.
Okay, super. Obviously, running a company is busy.
Yeah.
It's busy. Running startups are busy. What do you do outside of work to give you that kind of, that quote unquote work-life balance?
Yeah, for sure. So when I started working at Cube, I was doing a master's degree in analytics. I eventually got busy enough that I had to stop doing that because of wanting some sort of work-life balance. But kind of in my spare time, I'm a pretty active outdoors person, so I take advantage of all of the nice things Calgary has to offer. So I like to ski, mountain bike, golf, play soccer, some kind of variety of sports.
Yeah, I guess as CEOs of companies or presidents or whatever, you really need to take that time, right? In many ways, because I know people that don't, they get run down, don't they?
Yeah, Yeah, for sure. And I mean, we're kind of lucky, with the light we get in the summer. I can start work early, and then you can get out after work and drive to Bright Creek and go for a bike ride.
Oh, super then. All right. Well, thanks very much, Alex, for joining us today.
No problem. Thanks for having me, Mario.
All right, super. That was Alex MacGregor, CEO of Cube Technologies in Calgary. This has been Calgary's podcast with Mario Toneguzzi on Canada's Podcast Network. Thanks for joining us today.